Hi everyone. So yesterday my video was on vitamins, and so the previous video before that I was talking about my different routes that God had put kind of in my path and for treatment. And so I told you that I was at a fork in the road. And so real quick, I want to apologize to you guys. So sometimes I get tongue twisted and words kind of get flustered or coming out of my mouth. And so I want to apologize to you for that. It's just I have so much stuff in my head and I'm trying to pinpoint on all of it and trying to get it out that sometimes I get tongue twisted and it's crazy. So I apologize for all of that. And so anyways, back to I was at a fork in a road. And so I'm going to back up just a little bit for a brief moment. So you understand I lost my father-in-law to cancer about 11 years ago. And so when we found out that he only had 6 weeks to live, I had told you about the blood root. And so my mentor, I had forgotten about this. I had called him up on the phone and told him, I said, hey, my father-in-law is sick, and we found out he's only got 6 weeks to live. And so can I get some of this blood root from you? And so they had my father-in-law in hospice, and so we started giving him this blood root in capsules. And so we weren't really seeing any results from it. So we were like, I thought this was the right thing. My husband thought this was the right thing. So you guys understand, you guys are going to go through life and God's going to be planting these little seeds in you. And so at first when something comes to your attention, you're going to think to yourself, well, I wonder why I learned that, or I wonder why that came into my path. Those are seeds. God is planting little seeds in you. So I want you to be more aware now that when certain things come into your life, be more conscientious of that. And because you're going to remember those, and those little seeds are going to grow, and they're going to come about into your life in different periods and times, and you're going to always remember that, but it's for a reason. And so we put my father-in-law on this blood root, and I thought to myself, I said, I don't understand. I've heard so much about this. My mentor told me about this. Well, we ended up losing my father-in-law, and so time went, and mind you, that's still in my mind. I always knew it was there. I kept hearing things about it, at different times in my life. And so back to my fork in the road. So when my father-in-law was going through this, I had heard about this biomedical facility, and so a seed. And then I had told you guys about my friends from Australia sending me information about this. So my husband is in a pure panic, and he is like, I got to call my friends. And I told you about the friends that made the vitamins in Japan. And so I know I've kind of jumped around a little bit, and I apologize for that. And so he calls them up and tells them, look, they're wanting to do some massive chemo and radiation on Angela. And so my husband's friends I want to tell you something. And my husband had told him about the biomedical and about Australia. So my husband's friend that he's on the phone with that does these vitamins, he's all, let me tell you something. I had a friend that had stage 4 cancer, and the doctors in America had wrote him off. And so my husband's friend said, I did some researching and looking around, and he's all, I found this facility in Mexico. He's all, I know about the biomedical, but he's all, you don't want to send her there. They're not as thorough. And so he tells my husband about Dr. Castillo. And he was telling him about his friend that had stage 4 cancer. They had wrote him off, and he takes him there. And the guy did a 180. It was like this miraculous recovery. And so I always look for confirmations from God in threes. So I had people telling me about Mexico. I had people telling me about the biomedical. And we had prayed about it, and then my husband finds out about Dr. Castillo in Mexico. And so we prayed about it, and I said, well, I'll know when I call them. I called them on the phone, and I said, I told them everything that was going on with me, and I did a red eye to Mexico. And so we go to Mexico, they start talking to me, and just to hear them talk. And the doctor was telling me how, I might have to have chemo. Now, mind you, keep this in mind for a moment. I told the doctor, I'm like, ain't no way. This is why I'm here. And he's like, I need to explain to you something on how we administer chemo here versus how they administer chemo in America. And so I'm going to get back to that in just a second. So he's telling me about this chemo, that it might be in my protocol, but they would also be building my immune system up with these treatments. Now, if you guys remember in my last video, the doctor here, the oncologist here, wanted me to stop taking stop taking my vitamins and stop taking anything that was doing me any good. And now Mexico is the complete opposite. And so I listened to him and everything, and he asked me, he's all, why did you choose Mexico? And I told him, I said, God led me here. I'm sorry. And this doctor told me, he's all, I can't cure you. I am just a tool that God is using to help people. And I knew at that moment, that is where I was supposed to be. I knew without a doubt I was supposed to have treatment there. So my mother-in-law and I leave, and I was just filled with joy, and I was filled with peace. And they told me the cost when I was there, and for a brief moment I was kind of taken back, because they said it was going to be $8,000 for this treatment, and I knew that we had a short amount, because they wanted to start my treatment that day, and I said, financially, I can't do this. I need to go back to the States. I got to raise some money. I got to pray, however God figures this out, this is what I got to do. So my mother-in-law and I leave, and we go and eat lunch. And so I was sitting there, and it was like all of a sudden, I had this epiphany. And it was like God told me, do you understand why your father-in-law died now? Had he have went the route of chemo and radiation, it is very well possible I would have went that route. Had I have got approved for insurance, I probably would have had chemo, because it was going to pay for it, and I wasn't going to be scrambling around trying to figure this out financially. My family wasn't going to try to figure this out financially. So God is all, he died for you today. And I'm telling my mother-in-law this, and he's all, look at the journey you've been on from the time he's died until present. He's all, I needed you. I needed you to learn, and I needed to plant these seeds in you for today, so that you would take this route with me and trust me, so you can make more people aware that they had other options. And I'm thinking to myself, oh my gosh, I get it now. I understand why he died. And I'm telling my mother-in-law this. I'm like, he died for me today, because look at the journey that I've been on so far. Look at the things that I've learned. Look at the things that my family has learned. And my mother-in-law just started crying, and she's like, he did. He died for you. He died for you. God took him for you today. And so you guys understand, sometimes people, and this is for the people that don't believe in God, when situations like this happen, sometimes people have to suffer for other people to to excel, for other people to move forward in a easier path. And so I was filled with joy. I had peace. I knew God was going to get me through this and get my family through this. And I can't explain the feeling that I had. So my mother-in-law and I come back to the States, and I tell my family this is the route that we're taking. And I told my family that I had told the doctor that I would be there at the end of January. Now this is at the end of November. It was the beginning of December. So I have 2 months to raise $8,000 for my treatment, and money for me to stay over there, and money for me to live off of, because this treatment, my first round, was a month, and my mother-in-law was going to go with me. And so I remember coming to Arizona. Her and I took a trip to Arizona, and her and I were going to church, and we stood up, and they did this thing where you stand up and you talk about, things that you're grateful for from God. And the crazy thing about it is, I'm going to back up for just a minute, is when my sister died, I got a tattoo in honor of her. But I had went through a lot of struggles during that time, and I had gotten a tattoo of a Celtic horse on my back, because God gave horses to man for our companionship, and they're these mighty creatures. And underneath that it says, it's Psalms 118, it says, "For God is on my side, I will not fear. What can man do to me? For what can man do to me?" And so I go to church with her, and that verse, God weighed that verse on me. And so I stood up and I spoke, and I was telling everybody that, I got cancer. It's a very aggressive cancer. And God has led me on a different route, that I'm not doing conventional medicine, that I'm going to trust Him, and I'm taking this route right here, and I'm going to Tijuana, Mexico. And that I was so grateful for my mother-in-law doing this journey with me. And I talked about this verse that I have on my back, and what I thought people would be more accepting of the decision that God had put on me. But I was shocked to see how many people shunned me for the decision that God had given me, because it was almost like I was the black sheep, that I was doing something that nobody had actually dared to do, that you very rarely heard about it. And so these were people that I knew. These were people that I had gone to church with. And I remember leaving church that day, and we were traveling back to Wyoming, and I was telling my mother-in-law about this. I'm like, I've never felt more alone. I thought that my more friends and my church family would be more accepting to the path that God chose for me. And she was she didn't understand. And so I remember praying to God, and God waited on me, and He's all, because I've always pushed the envelope. I've always been that daring person. I'm that person that I don't fear like most people fear. I fear little stupid things. And so God told me it's because so many people, and I know this might be offending to some, and I can't even say that I'm sorry, because this is what God weighed on me. So many people have faith in God, but when it comes down to getting sick, how much faith do you actually have in Him? When you have somebody, remember what I told you about, we're all about touching, feeling, seeing. When we have a doctor that's actually standing in front of us, that's breathing in our face, that you can actually touch him. And he's telling us, if you don't do this, then you're going to die. But how many of us actually say, God, I'm stepping to the edge of that cliff and I'm jumping. I need you to catch me. And how many of us actually do that? Remember when I said that I didn't have the gift of faith like a lot of people do? And this was a testimony. It was a test. And so here I had preached about it, and I was being put to the test now. I had to show people this is what true faith is. This is taking your life and truly putting it in God's hands, not a man's hands. We are so willing as humans to believe man. Even though we're believers in God, we're so willing to believe man over God because we can see them. We can see man. And this is what God's telling me. He's all, people are not going to understand. They're going to have to see. And I thought, wow, I felt like God just made me a soldier. But then I was like, why would God use somebody like me, who is a wretch of a person, who's a sinner, who has hurt people in her past, who is, not always done the right thing? It's because it's never too late in God's eyes. It's never too late. And it's funny because God started showing me different people in the Bible that were wretches and sinners and had all kinds of flaws. And Paul was one of them. God weighed Paul on me like no other. And then here's Moses, who rebelled against God, but he led the whole Israel tribe into the promised land, and he still fell, he still faltered, and so here this big, huge, this huge journey with God, this huge responsibility had been put on me. And I thought, I can't show failure. I can't show times of wanting to give up. But God's all, it's okay. You're human. It's all right. And so my mother-in-law and I were just like, this is crazy, And so my husband, my children, a small portion of my friends, but the people that I thought would be more supportive weren't. And so it was very disheartening. But that's what I want you to understand. Sometimes God puts you in situations that people don't understand, and you might find yourself alone. But I'm telling you right now, you're gonna have this strength like you've never had before. So sorry to kind of get off, but this is my life, and I want to share, and this is raw transparency right here. So I'm home now. I'm telling my husband this. I'm telling my children this. So now we got to pray. We got to figure out a way. So this GoFundMe thing started coming around, and my sister-in-law's all, let me set this GoFundMe up. And I was like, okay, and I was kind of prideful because you don't want to ask for help. But you know what? That has a domino effect. If it's done righteously and you are helping people and people help you, it all comes around full circle. So this is where God's telling me, Angela, you have to swallow your pride and accept what I have put in front of you for help. And I was like, okay. So I allowed my sister-in-law to set up this GoFundMe, and my husband's talking to different people, and I'm making phone calls, and my brother-in-law calls me on the phone, and he's a doctor, wonderful man. My sister, I love her like no other. And he, because he's a doctor, he's a podiatrist, he went to this convention. And so he's calling me on the phone and he's like, Angie, I talked to some people at this convention. He's like, if you don't do chemo and radiation, he said, you could die. And I told him, I said, Ron, I really appreciate your input. I really appreciate you calling me. And my sister was so stressed out. She was so freaking out that I had chose this route. And I told her, I said, told him and I told her, I said, you have to just trust me on this. I said, God has me covered. I promise. Like there may be a lot of things I can't promise about, but I can promise this. And so as hard as it was for them to accept that, they got on board, they got behind me. And remember what I told you about being a fish in a fishbowl? People are watching. People are seeing, you know, they're watching to see what's going on and what's happening. And so my sister was so upset, but I had to pray to God. I was like, please comfort her. So she helped. She posted stuff about, you know, this GoFundMe, and it had only raised, you know, I forgot, I'm sorry, my memory sometimes, it raised between $3,000 and $4,000, I think. And so I was like, I don't have enough. And this had gone on till the time I had to get to Mexico. Mind you, my food, my nutrition, my vitamins, everything, I'm just pounding. I'm exercising like crazy. I mean, I'm just like, go. I'm just, you know, got to do what I got to do to keep my body healthy. And so, anyways, now we're getting down to the wire when I have this appointment with this doctor to go start my treatments. And my mother-in-law's at the house because she's going to travel with me. And I told her, I said, Marilyn, I don't have enough money. And so I told her, I said, we're packing up and we're leaving. And I said, I'm just trusting that God's going to provide the rest of the money. And so, you know, we pack up, we get ready to leave. And I'm kidding you. We weren't 40 minutes out of town. And there are deer and antelope and elk all over Wyoming. They're like rabbits. They're everywhere. I'm always cautious to the wildlife around. I'm driving her car. We're driving along. And she, out of nowhere, goes, oh, look. And I look over, and here's this deer, you know, whoopee doodah, sorry. And next thing I know, there was another deer that jumps. It was this massive, huge deer jumps in front of the car, and we wreck. And I'm like, we should have died. The way we hit this deer, as big as he was, we should have, I laugh, but I'm crying, and we should have died. The airbags never deployed, nothing. So we come to a screeching halt. This deer flies up over the car, lands 20 feet behind us. Her and I are sitting there looking at each other, and we're like, what just happened here? Like, what just happened? And I'm like, I would get mad about something like that. I would get frustrated. And I sat there as we're sitting on the side of the road. Smoke is coming out of her car. There's deer hair everywhere. There's blood. And I'm looking at my mother-in-law, and I'm like, is this God's plan? Like, we were headed to my treatment. Like, it was set up. And so we sat there for a few minutes, and the sheriff drives by, and bless his heart, man, this guy sat with us the whole entire time until a tow truck shows up. I call my husband, I call my kids. I'm like, well, we need to pray because we just totaled this car. And so I was like, okay, God, I'm not going to get mad or upset because you've got something in mind for me. And I said, I don't want to get upset or angry. And so this guy, the sheriff, calls the tow truck. He sits there for like 2 hours waiting for this tow truck. Because if you guys have ever been to Wyoming, there's long stretches between towns. It's very desolate, small little towns. The whole population of Wyoming is 500,000. So seriously. So this tow truck driver pulls up, and he hooks onto the car, totals the car. We get in there with him, and we start talking, and he asked where we were going, and I told him we were headed to Mexico because I have cancer. Remember what I told you about the seeds? This guy's wife has Hashimoto's disease, and he had bought the book called Truth About Cancer. So this hour drive with this guy we have never met, we are talking about my treatments, and he was all, I am so glad to hear somebody is going this route. And he was talking about his wife, and he's all, I have this book, have you ever read it? And I said, no. So he takes us to his house, perfect stranger, takes us to his house, gets this book for me, and tells me, I'm going to loan this book to you. You just got to promise to give it back. And I was like, I promise you, I'll give it back. So I was like, we were meant to meet this guy. So he gives me this book. We get a ride home. Car goes to the shop. We get a ride home. And so I was like, well, what do we do now? And so I was like, I'm going to start reading this book. Remember what I told you about? I thought I knew stuff about cancer. I thought I knew. I just got more educated. So time went on. We're here for a couple of days. My mother-in-law and I are praying relentlessly. My family's praying relentlessly. And we're like, I was sitting there, I told her, or I was telling God, she was watching Joyce Meyers. I'm at the table reading my Bible, praying like a crazy woman. I have never prayed more in my life as I did those couple of days. And I was like, God, I know this was in your plan. I know this was meant to be. Help me figure this out. I was like, I have so much on my plate. And he's like, Angela, I want you to take this one stepping stone at a time. Stop stressing, stop worrying. He's all, I will set the stones out and you step when I ask. And he's all, and you're going to look back, and he's all, you're going to see this path that I have laid out and that you've walked. So you take one stepping stone at a time. And he tells me this, and no lie, it was 5 minutes later, because he had waited on me. He's all, this is why you got in the accident. And it was 5 minutes later, I'm not kidding you, my mother-in-law turns around and she's all, I know how we're going to pay for the rest of your treatment. And I was like, how? She's all, from the insurance settlement on the car we just wrecked. And I was so taken back and so filled with the Holy Spirit and so filled with God that I was like, I understand why we got in that car accident, why we were never hurt, why the airbags never deployed, why this deer didn't come colliding into the car with us. And when I tell you God works in mysterious ways, I am not kidding. He works in the craziest ways. And so she makes a phone call to the insurance company. She finds out, and I'm not kidding you, it was the exact same amount that I needed for my treatment. So I'm going to end the video today because I am just a blubbering, crying fool right now. And I probably missed half the things I probably should have told you. But that's part of being raw. That's part of being transparent. So I'm going to end the video today. I will be back tomorrow. I love you guys. You guys always keep faith, pray, and never give up hope.